over to you.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for choosing to participate in today's webinar. We're going to talk about planning for a retirement budget or spending plan. And we're going to look at it from the broadest possible view. And we're viewing this as voluntary retirement, when you are planning ahead for the retirement lifestyle you would like to have. And if you would please, there you go, turn the page. Basically, we all have 4 resources that we combine to get us through our daily activities and our lifetime activities. And the availability of these resources changes somewhat when you move into retirement and you are no longer working full-time. There's a limitation of only 24 hours a day for all of us. If 8 of those are going to work, it means you have less time for other things. So during retirement, you can look at the potential enjoyment of having a little more time, energy, and talent resources. Sorry. That you can use for your expenditures, your activities, your enjoyment. And in some cases, time and energy can reduce the amount of money you need for various resources. The easy example is you may have time and energy to do more cooking at home and less eating out. Your talent resources are what you have used for a lot of your employment activities, and now you can redirect that talent to volunteer activities or craft activities, helping activities, whatever you choose to use the talent for, that gives you satisfaction and helps you enjoy your retirement. Next slide, please. Okay. What we're going to look at first and foremost as we're planning for retirement is to see what lifestyle changes are going to occur that are acceptable to you to move into retirement. You're going to begin by reviewing your spending for the last year. And this is your cash spending as well as your credit card spending, because most of us will find that while there is a routine and there are many bills that are the same coming through monthly, there are what's called irregular expenses as well that happen when there's an oops or there's something special going on. It may be a key relative got married last year and you gave a gift and that was an irregular expense. It may be the car broke down and you had to spend more on that repair than you had originally set aside. If you look at the whole year, you will have better insight into the diversity of expenses you need to prepare for in retirement. Once you get the list together, and I would recommend the easy way to do it is on a spreadsheet. I believe if you use Google, there is a Google Docs form that is a spreadsheet, and it allows you to put everything in columns, total them up, subtract things, whatever you want, and simplify the math. Because one of the things you're going to do once you look back at the year's expenses is you're going to subtract out everything was work related that will not continue when you are retired. For example, the cost of commuting, meals out at restaurants, if that's your norm, special clothing for work, anything like that that may have made a difference. You are not likely to be contributing to a retirement savings plan once you are fully retired. So that is an expense that you will no longer have. You are also likely to find that your taxable income will change, and the amount that you owe to the government for income taxes may actually be lower than what you're paying now. So it can be helpful once you've got a clearer vision of your retirement income to work with your tax preparer to see how your income taxes may change, and they may change in steps. If you retire prior to age 72, you are likely to find your taxable income can be lower than after 72, because 72 is the new starting age for mandatory distributions from your 401k or 403b or IRA and related retirement accounts. You may also find that when you are no longer employed, you have new expenses. If you retire before you reach age 65 and you're healthy, you are not yet eligible for Medicare. So you may need to shop for individual health insurance. If you have been employed by a firm with at least 20 employees, you may also have a choice to continue in your work-based health insurance under a law called COBRA. If you are over 65, you are Medicare eligible, but Medicare is not 100% free. There are various components of Medicare, and some of it is at no cost to you. And if you want more comprehensive coverage and need a supplement, et cetera, and a prescription drug plan, you will have some new expenses. Some of you are working for employers where you get a discount on the things you buy from that employer, and that discount may disappear when you retire. It depends on where you work, whether that's a significant impact or a minor impact. You also, in this particular year, need to look carefully when you go back 1 year and examine your spending, because it may not be fully typical of a normal year, because COVID has kept many of us inside a little more and less involved in community activities and travel and things that you may feel are an important part of your retirement activities. So it may even be advantageous to look back 2 years. And so you're looking at some of the things that you spent money on in 2019, as well as 2021, because of the COVID impact. Next slide, please. No. Yep. Once you have a sense of how much money you expect to need to maintain your lifestyle in retirement, it's time to take a look at where the income is coming from and if you have enough to meet your desired spending. Social Security has a website. You should be able to determine what to expect as a Social Security benefit at various ages. You can talk to a Social Security representative if you prefer. And the amount of the Social Security check varies with your age and the number of years of work that you have completed. In some cases, and this has been true of some of the Savvy Ladies contacts that I've helped. If you work for a state government, they may choose to be an alternative to Social Security and not necessarily contribute to Social Security. So you may be getting a government pension, but no Social Security check. It's also important for those of you that are divorced to be aware that if your marriage lasted 10 years or more, you may be eligible for a Social Security benefit from your former spouse. And this is not in any way jeopardizing the benefits of a second, third, or other spouse of that person, because Social Security is perfectly willing to pay a divorced spouse's benefits as many times as they need against any one individual's Social Security. It does not reduce the benefit in any way. You're also going to have decisions if you are a couple on, do I take a single pension on that's payable during my lifetime alone, or do I take a joint pension so that a certain percentage of the pension benefit is paid to my spouse if I am the first to die? Some pension firms even allow you to guarantee a certain minimum number of years of pensions, so that if you're a single person or a couple and you want to say, I want this payment paid to me, my surviving spouse, or my kids for a minimum of 10 years. Sometimes that's a choice, sometimes even 20 years. So you need to think through the repercussions of these choices and which way you'd like to go, what makes the most sense for your circumstances. It's very common for many of us that we've worked in a variety of different places with different employers over our full career. So that means there may be pensions you're eligible for that you aren't sure about or have to go try to track them down. If a former employer has gone bankrupt and closed, it is possible that there is still a pension plan set up for their employees, and it is managed by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is pbgc.gov. So if that's your circumstance, that's the website to check if there is a pension available and if you're eligible. There is also a website that's not on this slide that is www.unclaimed.org, which allows you to check unclaimed property in various states to see if there's anything you may have inadvertently left behind if you lived in a different state. Also, I'm hoping that most of you have some savings set aside to use for retirement. They come in a variety of flavors. Obviously, the one that's assumed to be most useful in retirement is if you have a retirement account through your current or former employer, or if you've merged them into an individual retirement account that you've been managing on your own. These are, as a general rule, any withdrawals made from these retirement accounts are going to be taxable income in the year of the withdrawal. There are some exceptions. If you have a Roth IRA or a portion of your employer retirement account is a Roth 401k, excuse me, the withdrawals from the Roth are not taxable. Some 401ks also accept after-tax contributions that are not Roth. So if you have a variety of components to your retirement account at work, it would be very wise to talk with someone in human resources that can explain these to you and help you to understand the differences and what your obligations are for withdrawals. If you have saved outside of the retirement accounts in personal accounts, they are not going to be taxed as heavily as a general rule as withdrawals from your retirement accounts. And they are yours to use during retirement as needed. The tax rate on most investments done in personal accounts, if they're growth-oriented choices like stocks or mutual funds, the tax is usually at what's called the capital gains tax rate, which can be lower than the tax rate that would apply to withdrawals from your retirement accounts, from your defined contribution or IRA accounts. For those of you that own a home and its value is greater than whatever the balance is on the mortgage, that's home equity that is yours to use as you choose in retirement if you need it. There is something called a reverse mortgage that can help you access that equity if need be, if you would like to continue living in the house, but need to access some of this accumulated wealth to meet your spending needs in retirement. And the other thing, which is generally a much smaller source of income, is if you have collectibles, antiques, just an overwhelming number of items that you are no longer attached to. You may want to just begin to sell some of these off so that it gives you more spending money in retirement. Next slide, please. Okay, you're ahead of me. The biggest question and the hardest one to answer is, how much can I withdraw from these various savings accounts and not outlive my money in retirement? In the 1990s, a financial planner did research looking back historically at what's a reasonable rate of withdrawal from total savings without overspending during retirement. And he developed what's called the 4% rule, which is not cast in stone. It's really just a beginning point for guessing at what is a reasonable, affordable spending level in retirement. And the 4% rule basically says you can total the value of your investments, take 4% out for spending money during the first year of retirement, increase that distribution rate equal to the rate of inflation each year. And if the money is invested in a blend of stocks and bonds that's at least around 50% stocks and 50% bonds, your money should last 30 years, regardless of what the markets are doing. Generally, this is a reasonable starting guideline. I would not cast it in stone. There's been some discussions in recent years with such low interest rates that we have been experiencing recently that maybe 4% is a little high, and some advisors are saying it may be more prudent to withdraw at the 3% level. The bottom line is, unless you have figured out a way to predict exactly how long you're going to live, this is always a little tricky because not everybody gets 30 years of retirement. Some people get more, some people get a lot less. So it's a beginning point that may need to be modified as you move forward. It's going to depend on your longevity, your investment choices, etc. The IRAs and lump sum retirement accounts that are also called defined contribution accounts have required minimum distributions that begin at age 72. They continue until age 115. So obviously they're trying to preserve some money for elders that live a very long time. You are allowed to take more or less, more out after, at any time after 59 and a half without penalty. If you take less than the required minimum distribution, you could be subject to a 50% penalty when you file your income taxes. So it's very important to be aware of this. You are not obligated to spend every penny you take out of the retirement accounts. You can set some aside for the future, but you do have to follow the rules on withdrawal requirements. They changed the laws on inherited IRAs in December of 2019. They have become much more complicated, and I would say that they're still to some degree a work in progress. But if you were to inherit an IRA from someone who is not your spouse and is not, I believe it's within 10 years of your age, you could be required to liquidate that entire inherited IRA within 10 years of that original owner's date of death. So that could cause it to have higher taxes applied than it occurred for the original owner or the spouse of the original owner. What does that mean to have an inherited IRA? Yes, if your parent died and left an IRA account to you, it would be considered an inherited IRA. There have always been rules on the required distributions from inherited IRAs. They have always been different than the rules on your own IRA, but they changed in the end of 2019, which went into effect in January of 2020. And you are required, when you have an inherited IRA, to have inherited IRA in its title. So that will help you to understand that it is different from your own IRA. If you are the surviving spouse, you have the choice to merge your deceased spouse's IRA into your own IRA, which means it doesn't have to say inherited in the title for that circumstance. It depends on if you are the primary beneficiary, if you are over 59 and a half or under 59 and a half when you receive it. There are a bunch of complicated rules, and perhaps Savvy Ladies will do a webinar on that one day. A reverse mortgage is something we mentioned earlier, where you are allowed to borrow the equity in your home. There are generally fees involved to complete the reverse mortgage. It is repaid upon sale of the house, which can occur at your demise. It may allow a legally married spouse to stay longer, but there are hiccups in the rules for reverse mortgages, just like there are hiccups in the rules for inherited IRAs. So it's something that you need to understand carefully before you sign on the dotted line. AARP offers some education on reverse mortgages, and so do some other nonprofits. So it's important to do your research before you sign an agreement of this kind or any kind. Okay. When you add up the various sources of income, if they aren't enough to offset all of your expected expenses in retirement, you need to make some trade-offs. I'd also wanted to mention that one of the things we did not include in this webinar is the costs of long-term care, because that's a separate webinar that Savvy Ladies is doing, I believe, the first week of December. Okay, but if your, next slide, please. If your expenses are higher than your income, then it's time to go back to time, energy, talent, and money and see what trade-offs are acceptable to get you into retirement. One of the things that you may consider is, can you barter with friends or family to share some of your talents, your time, your energy, so that you have to spend less money? Do you really need a car? Do you really need 2 cars? If you babysit for your grandchildren, does that mean that the kids will help you with something else, whether it's to share meals or shop for something for you? If you're looking for ways to creatively use your talent and your time, and you don't want to spend money, then maybe you should consider volunteering to helping an organization that is meaningful to you. I've been fortunate that Savvy Ladies has been virtual, and I've been able to volunteer to help while I'm stuck at home avoiding COVID. So, you know, there are trade-offs with everything. It is also possible, since housing costs can be a big bite out of anyone's spending needs, that you consider downsizing the family house to something big enough for 1 or 2, that you consider sharing your house if you would benefit from having a roommate or renting out a space if it is legal where you live. Some people find that they can boost their spendable income if they just rent out their house and go visit friends or relatives during a big event like, I don't know if you saw the article, but the environmental meeting in, I believe it was Ireland, for a couple of weeks. There wasn't enough housing for everybody in attendance, and a lot of people wound up renting out their properties for very high sources. Yes, Glasgow, which helped them have a little more spending money for other things. There are people who live in parts of the country where there's a jazz festival or something else goes on for a couple weeks in the summer. And they go away at that time, rent their house out, and make a little extra money. The other thing you can consider is, if you're ready to retire from your career job, if you're burned out, exhausted, just want to do something else, it doesn't mean you have to be fully retired. You can work at something you enjoy to help fill the income gap. If you work remotely, you're going to have the lowest expenses for this new opportunity. I live in Florida. There are a lot of craft fairs that go on all over Florida. I believe for some people, this is an additional source of income and activity during at least the earlier years of their retirement, because they can sell their handiwork. You may have other skills or talents that are saleable that would be helpful. I've worked with clients over the years that choose their favorite retail store and go work there part-time because they want the discount that an employee gets, not because they necessarily need the income. But sometimes if there's a small shortfall, it can help you to match expenses to income and help you move into retirement more easily. The other alternative that works for some people is to grin and bear it and stay with the current job a few extra years. So instead of funding 30 years of retirement, maybe you're only funding 25, and it gives you a little more breathing room. The other thing that's important to note is your highest Social Security check is generally if you have at least 35 years of work in the Social Security system. Some of us took time off when our kids were little and may not have 35 years just yet. So it's important to check the Social Security statement, see if you have maxed this out and if it makes sense to grin and bear it and stay with your current job for a while longer. Maximizing pension benefits in a government pension or corporate pension, you need to understand the details and see if working another couple of years is going to make a difference. The question is, what age does my ex-husband, and it closed. What age does my ex-husband have to be for me to draw from his Social Security? I am not 100% sure, but it would be worth checking with the Social Security agency. I believe if you go online to their website and type that question in, they'll give you the details. In some cases, he has to be of retirement age, and in other circumstances, he does not. Early retirement is generally still at 62 unless you are widowed. A widow is eligible to collect a retirement benefit on the deceased spouse at age 60. As I'm sure you know, if you collect Social Security early, it's a smaller check because it's paid over a longer number of years. Okay, next page. Basically, the purpose and the agenda of this webinar is really to say you need to do some planning to avoid hasty decisions in retirement. If you understand your Social Security choices and the choices for your pension income, a few years before you retire, you're going to make some more informed decisions on how well these pension choices will help you to meet your goals. It's also important to know that there can be some negative impact on Social Security benefits. There is something called a government pension offset rule, where if you have worked for a government agency where you have not contributed to Social Security, you may lose some spousal Social Security benefits. There's also a Windfall Elimination Act that says if you worked for government and do not have at least 35 years in the Social Security system, you may get a smaller Social Security check because you are getting the government pension. So it's important to understand the ifs, ands, and buts on all of this before you say, bye, I'm retiring now, because you're not necessarily going to be able to go back to a job you've left as easily as you can stay in one that you're already working in. You may be eligible for other government subsidies that you are not aware of, and you may be able to find some reference at eldercare.acl.gov to see if there's additional assistance available to you in some way. Obviously, you're going to be in better shape handling retirement if your debt is paid off before you retire, and if you do your best to avoid any new debt from routine expenses. So your credit card balance can be used for true emergencies if needed during your retirement years. We've already mentioned that you may want to reconsider doing some kind of work, hopefully something that's enjoyable if you're not ready to be fully retired. This can also enhance your Social Security checks because the more you work, the more you are eligible for in the higher Social Security check. If you have less than 35 years of employment under Social Security, there are going to be zeros earnings factored in for those years. If you earn even $10,000 a year instead of zero, it could positively impact your Social Security check at least a little bit. It's also important to realize that if you're one of the fortunate that has longevity, especially, you can have retirement that you're going to experience in several stages, that what you have the time, energy, talent to do when you're an early retiree may not be of interest when you're a 95-year-old retiree. So you may decide that spending a little more while you're young and healthy is acceptable as long as you've adequately prepared for the longevity that could occur later in life. Absolutely, you want to plan some fun into your retirement. The question is only how much of it is going to come from money resources and how much is it going to come from time, energy, and talent resources. So you don't need to save as much money to get you started on retirement. It's also important that you are flexible and adaptable because there are inevitable surprises. I doubt that there's anybody in this country or possibly even in the world that planned on COVID. And while I would love to see the surprises being only positive, we have to look at both. So planning ahead should be helpful for any and all of us. And I sincerely hope that you can set aside some time, energy, and your talent to legitimately examine what you can afford, what your resources are, and you can plan for a retirement that you will truly enjoy. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions if we have any.